All right, everyone. If you've ever wondered what it's like to work in a high-tech office environment with social justice graduates from Wilfrid Laurier University and surrounding Waterloo universities, now's your chance. Now, this is a hard story to tell because it's part of a larger story I have been waiting eagerly to tell for some time. I've had to wait to tell the whole story for legal reasons and because the story is very close to its ending as I say this, but not quite there yet. I also want to report some recent developments, but first of all, let me explain that I am so passionate about following the Lindsay Shepherd controversy because I went through pretty much the exact same thing she went through. And when I say pretty much, I mean in the same place, Waterloo, by the same types of people who graduated from Wilfrid Laurier University and other Waterloo universities out of the humanities programs, people who not only exhibited the same behavior and spouted the same axioms and idioms as the professors and commissar of campus safety who harassed Lindsay, but who even enunciated their words in that same horrible Southern California girl accent, and whose professors may very well have been the same culprits involved in the Lindsay Shepherd affair. But before I tell you what I know about these specific people and what it's like to work with them, let's look at the latest developments in this ongoing saga. All right, so Wilfrid Laurier University has issued its statement of defense, and they fumbled it. I don't know if that's a surprise to anyone, but let's talk a little bit about that. Now, I want to zero in specifically on one portion of their statement of defense. I haven't been able to read it directly. I've only been able to find articles that have excerpts from it. That's kind of frustrating because I did spend some time trying to find it. Maybe someone in the comment section knows where it is. But the statement reads, the impugned words were uploaded to YouTube by Shepherd, and she is therefore responsible for the damages, if any, that flowed from the impugned words being broadcast. Now, this isn't just a statement by Wilfrid Laurier University, but what's interesting is that the National Post actually takes that assertion in the statement of defense and reports it as fact.
Lindsay Shepherd did not publish the audio. She did record it, but she didn't publish it. She tweeted, "Hilarious. Laurier's defense is claiming I am responsible for the damages of Jordan Peterson's $1.5 million lawsuit because the impugned words were uploaded to YouTube by Shepherd. No, I have never uploaded the recording to YouTube. Your whole premise is wrong. Global News first released an excerpt version and actually never asked me if that was okay. Then National Post released a full version on SoundCloud, and copies were uploaded after by various accounts to YouTube." The National Post tweeted out the story with an excerpt from the defense statement, and Lindsay Shepherd responded, "No, I have never uploaded the recording to YouTube. You guys, National Post, Tristan Hopper, were actually the first to upload the whole recording to SoundCloud, and Tristan Hopper, who is, in fact, an Edmonton-based reporter for the National Post, said this is indeed correct." So I do want to point out, it would seem that the National Post is wrong in this statement right here, where it says Shepherd secretly recorded and eventually published to YouTube.
And if you want a full rundown regarding the Wilfrid Laurier lawsuit and their statement of defense, please do go and check out Tim's video. And, you know, if you're looking for a reporter who really tries to adhere to classical reporting ethics and has a lot of integrity, someone you can trust to really try to do the job as it's meant to be done, I recommend you subscribe to Tim's channel, to both his channels. He has Tim Pool and also Tim Cast. I think you should subscribe because you can really get the kind of objective news that you probably crave from Tim. He uploads 2 videos every day. So in case you missed what just happened there, what Tim just told you is that the National Post took an assertion from a statement of defense and published it as fact without checking with a person who could confirm it, Lindsay Shepherd. Then a National Post reporter confirmed Shepherd's denial that she was the one who posted it to YouTube or anywhere else, and the National Post still hasn't corrected the article. So that's interesting, and that's a reporting fail. Pretty embarrassing one. But what's interesting about this statement is just the whole tone I'm getting from these excerpts. It reads like like how a teenager would respond to their parents. Like it's very like kind of immature, especially this one paragraph. Well, he shouldn't sue us. He should sue Lindsay Shepherd because she caused this whole problem by being smart enough to record a couple of insane ideologues that were about to try to railroad her, as I was railroaded by the very same kinds of people out of the very same universities when I worked at a pretty important technology company. So I'm going to tell a medium-length story. There will be occasional visual cues, but for the most part, this is about listening. But I think you'll want to hear this story. So grab some tea or whatever you drink, a snack, and listen to a story about how social justice warriors from Wilfrid Laurier University and surrounding schools turned my dream job into a nightmare. So to begin, working at this company was the highlight of my career. It was a deep packet inspection company at the bleeding edge of internet technology, based in Waterloo. If you can think of the internet technology revolution as a wave, this company sat right on the tip of the crest. When I joined in 2008, they had almost no marketing capability or collateral, direct or otherwise, and I helped considerably to build that infrastructure over 8 years. I wrote 95% of the company's published white papers during its entire run, besides writing hundreds of customer RFP, or requests for proposal, responses to persuade key customer gatekeepers to select our solution over the competition's. At first I was just a coordinator, then I was quickly made the leader of a team of coordinators, and then I found myself completely solo for a year and a half as the other coordinators quit under the pressure one typically encounters working at a startup. I stepped up and worked 16-hour days, often into the weekend, and I did this at varying intensities for a year and a half as the company experienced the typical growing pains of a startup transitioning into adulthood. It was the first time in my life that I was able to really stretch out and achieve my full potential, and everything Jordan Peterson says about how that feels for someone like me is bang on. To see the difference you're making, to be really helping and productive doing something that excites you, it's a genuinely fulfilling experience. I had always been a technophile since I was a small kid. I bought my first computer, an IBM 386 clone with 25 megahertz CPU, when I was 13 for $3,700. I was on bulletin board systems long before a public internet existed. I understood how all of this stuff worked while news anchors on TV were asking the camera what the internet was exactly. From the age of 16, I was pretty much on my own. I worked various jobs and put myself through university where I received a journalism degree. I actually wanted to be a tech writer, to do journalism, whether private or public, covering internet technology in various published forms. Now, there was an actual marketing communications group at the company I worked at, but everyone in sales knew not to use them or even make requests of them. They produced these little one-page sheets advertising the company's products that were full of errors and which quickly became out of date for a sales environment that shifted rapidly as the technology evolved, and so they were useless as sales tools. But we needed effective marketing collateral, so I began creating it for the sales guys myself. I created tailored communications and published externally facing documents that actually explained why our company's technological approaches were better than the competition's. I was lucky because our company's tech was actually both unique and better, so I could write very objective industry white papers that were engaging for technical evaluators looking for rational and detailed academic arguments. I would then link those objectively argued conclusions to another deep dive document that promoted our company's specific products and tech. I called these companion documents technology showcases. They were like academic white papers, but with marketing messaging for our company's products attached to the objectively proven conclusions. Sales began requesting a whole string of these because they were actually useful for winning sales. Eventually, the company expanded, and I was put in charge of marketing 2 product suites, along with being responsible for the authorship and maintenance of all of the key collateral across all product suites, proven to persuade the customer gatekeepers to select our solution over others. White papers, technology showcases, and a vast database of ready-made responses to the complex questions found in customer RFPs to assist the 4-person team that had just been brought in to fill my former role. It was at this time that the first signs that something was beginning to go seriously amiss began to surface. As the company expanded, one of the first departments to swell was human resources. It was soon populated by several graduates of Wilfrid Laurier University and other Waterloo area universities. A decision was made to form a new product marketing department. They would basically fuse the existing marketing group that no one used with me. I would bring with me pretty much all of the knowledge of what's persuasive to key customer decision makers and help mentor the new team members to better understand our company's tech, how to associate product features and benefits, why they're important, how to message them. I would essentially be the lead technology writer and technical manager of the group. What was weird was that human resources decided to put a married couple from the original marketing group, the one that everyone had learned to work around, in charge of this new department. They would both be managers, each running one of the two groups that made up the department. I had always thought the first rule of HR, like HR 101, was don't let a married couple run your marketing department or any department within your company. I had always understood that this inevitably leads to problems. It would be so easy for a married couple who have complete authority over a critical department comprised of two interdependent groups to run interference for each other and play dirty politics. What if they had a terrible divorce? These are obvious problems that are typically avoided in a company. Anyway, these two were both graduates of Waterloo Universities, one from the humanities and the other from computer science, who had failed in his computer science career. And they were vociferously vocal about their political wokeness and commitment to social justice values. Now, initially, I had no exposure to what these two social justice heroes were doing. See, I was offered the option of working from Ottawa after having proven myself as an independently motivated technology writer and technical guru. I would perform my new role from 550 kilometers away from the main office. And that's primarily the reason why it took so long for me to realize how badly these social justice graduates were poisoning the work culture back at the office. And it's also the reason why it took them so long to bring me down. Of course, I had no idea at the beginning that they perceived me as an enemy to be taken down because of my skin color, gender, competence, technical inclinations, incumbent status, and most importantly, my complete disinterest in their social justice politics in the workplace. I would come to visit the office once per quarter, but otherwise interact remotely with sales, as I had always done, and now with this new team. As this new team expanded, new hires came aboard, new hires chosen by these two married social justice warriors. The wife seemed to be hiring less capable clones of herself, and they multiplied quickly. The husband hired a few capable people, but they quickly left. Once, when I was visiting the office, I saw the reason why. We had just hired this really smart guy who really seemed to know what he was doing. Actually, he was a part-time actor, and soon I saw how good he was at it. I watched for a week while this guy was systematically dominated by the manager that had just hired him, my manager. He was stepping on his explanations, his anecdotes, his jokes, interrupting him when he tried to express his ideas. This new guy would just keep a smile on his face, but when he swiveled his chair around to face his computer, I saw it transform every time into the kind of grimace that denotes the thought, man, what a dick. He quit within a couple of months of being hired. Now, like I said at the beginning of this, I'm only recounting about 20% of the full-blown experience because I want to keep this to at least a medium length. So one of the things I had been waiting for was a promised new hire that would offload the responsibility of doing all of the competitive analysis and intelligence for the company across all products and technologies. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I was responsible for all of that too. Eventually, someone was hired to do that job, and it would be my task to mentor. As time went on, there was little to no improvement in her capacity to conduct effective competitive intelligence analysis. I would tutor her one-on-one, and although she would be very quiet, she would clearly indicate that she understood and could perform the tasks she had been assigned by our mutual manager. She had 5 years of the collateral I had developed to draw from, plus, of course, her natural interest and curiosity in the products, solutions, technology, applications, and customers. But things did not improve, and I found myself compensating for that deficiency and increasingly the deficits of the new people hired into the other group by my manager's wife. None of these new hires were ramping up to speed. It was a deer caught in headlights look every time I or any veteran engineer or product manager would try to engage with them about the products, customers, strategies, features, and benefits. Because I worked remotely, I didn't realize how quickly and profoundly the work culture was being altered by human resources and this married couple who had been given full administrative control over the company's entire marketing strategy and resources. When I would visit the office, I was alarmed to see the incredible lack of actual work going on in both groups. There was an enormous amount of effort instead devoted to talking about social justice politics and popular culture. I visited like 6 times a year, and every time I was there, it was like a cross between a college dorm and an MTV social justice issues show. And then the real weirdness began. First, my manager's wife, and then my manager, approached me and tried to get me to say that my former boss in professional services, when I did the RFP work, was an overrated loudmouth who was quote unquote problematic in the office. I disagreed, confused as to why this was even an important topic of discussion. The next weird thing was I was at a conference and everyone was supposed to go out after the conference finished for the day to walk Bourbon Street. This was in New Orleans. But somehow the only person that showed up to the invite sent by my manager's wife was me. Everyone else canceled for one reason or another or didn't get the invite. And then I was subjected to a very personal interrogation. I told myself that this was their awkward way of trying to get to know me. Both of them seemed to have some kind of low-grade Asperger's, and they were hard to read most of the time. I tried to keep the conversation away from my personal life and on general subjects. But when we returned from the conference, my manager pulled me into a room and demanded to know what his wife and I had talked about, whether we had talked about anything deep, and just generally behaved like the most insecure husband you've ever seen. I thought to myself, this is why you don't let married couples run departments. And then I made a classic mistake that you never want to make with these people. I decided to just try to reassure this quivering mess of insecurity that whatever it was that was bothering him, I was sorry. Don't do that. Don't ever apologize to these ideologues trying to be the bigger person. They don't think like you do. As Peterson rightly notes, they will use your apology as an admission of guilt, and you don't even know what you're admitting guilt to. In any case, he seemed to calm down, because I suppose he had what he needed, and then once again tried to get me to declare that my former boss was an overrated loudmouth who was a problematic presence in the office. I disagreed. Things just got more and more sour with these two from that point forward. As things progressed, on paper it looked like there were the necessary resources to do all the necessary work. But in actuality, I was doing most of the critical decision making and a lot of the work for these strange new employees hired by these two managers. Someone once told me that they're called potatoes. So when a company expands rapidly, highly ideological and authoritarian leftists get into middle management, and once there, they quickly sprout these potatoes in the dark. The potatoes are less capable versions of the hiring managers themselves, chosen for their likelihood to be loyal to and easily dominated by the hiring manager. Anyway, I raised these new hire performance problems with the group manager. I have a chronic health condition that's still a thorn in my side today, although much improved from how it was back then. Back then, the symptoms had gotten to a point where it was often difficult to concentrate, and all the extra time I was spending working to compensate for all of these underachieving new hires was keeping me from sourcing a diagnosis from Canada's third world healthcare system. Oh, yeah. If you're an American looking up at Canada and thinking about our socialized healthcare system with sugar plums dancing in your heads, well,
you don't know. This place isn't what we thought it was. They aren't what we thought they were. I was wrong. We were so wrong.
that's all I'm going to say about that in this video. Just trust me, you don't want our healthcare system. You'll often hear it posted this way: you shouldn't have to go bankrupt to receive quality medical care. Well, in Canada, you get to go both bankrupt and experience years of physical torture, and pay a whole shitload of extra tax on top of that to sustain the whole system. You can't make money if you can hardly stand because your healthcare system encourages doctors to view you more as a specimen than a customer. Anyway, there came what I thought was the perfect opportunity to address both problems. One of the new hires was given the job of writing press releases when our previous press release writer, another veteran who was awesome at her job, went on maternity leave. I was asked to review the new hire's press release drafts. This woman was a recent graduate from the School of Writing and Rhetoric from the University of Waterloo. I received a draft to review, and it contained an unusual amount of grammar, spelling, and punctuation errors, which she refused to correct. When I asked her why on Skype, she told me that she just liked to write that way and it was her style. I told her that incorrect grammar and punctuation can't be a style, not for customer-facing press releases talking about multi-million-dollar products. She insisted it was her way of writing and ended the call. I figured here was the perfect example of Dunning-Kruger to bring up with my manager. Usually you can correct Dunning-Kruger relatively easily. You just have to show the inept person who thinks they are competent the correct way of doing whatever it is they're trying to do, and they will adopt it. But there was a block on the usual corrective mechanism here. I said to my manager, it's almost like she doesn't see me as a senior published writer reviewing her work and mentoring a new hire, but like I'm trying to oppress her for pointing out very obvious grammar and punctuation issues. I asked that he address this specific problem and the issue in general with the other group's new hires with the manager of the other group, who, as I have previously said, was also the guy's wife. I also decided to take 2 weeks to fully explore a solution to my increasingly painful health problem. If I was going to deal with all this increased and unexpected workload, I needed to deal with this health problem. When I returned from that healthcare excursion, all hell broke loose. Suddenly, I was brought in for an early performance review and told by my manager that I was being given 2 out of 5 stars and would lose my profit sharing bonus. I'd always received a 5 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 performance review. I was told numerous complaints had come in from numerous people that I was difficult to work with and that I couldn't meet deadlines. At the same time, someone called human resources at my company and made a number of slanderous accusations about me before abruptly hanging up, which the human resources director tried to interrogate me about. This all happened in the span of a week immediately after I returned. Soon I was placed on a performance improvement plan, but all of the areas of improvement just listed vague attacks on my character. Things like he's difficult to work with and I don't like his tone, and similar type criticisms. It was my first time experiencing the classic smear tactics of a collectivist ideology applied directly against me. And at the time, I didn't know that I had just been misdiagnosed with the wrong disease and placed on the wrong medication. But I now know that this inappropriate medication was interfering with my ability to even follow what was going on as the accusations, bizarre rumors, and administrative punishments from human resources continued to increase over the next few weeks. I had to account for every 15 minutes of my day with daily reports to my manager. Besides being really confused and shell-shocked by all of this, the added stress and time I had to spend dealing with it all seriously complicated my healthcare. I was so spooked by all of this that I was forced to accept a diagnosis I didn't agree with. The way Canada's healthcare system works, if I didn't go along with the doctor I had been assigned to at this point, I would be forced to quit my career. Those were some of the most difficult months of my life. And as the treatment failed to work and the symptoms grew worse, and all this nonsense continued, everything started to get pretty dark for old T. McLeanful, gotta say. Fast forward a few months, and all of this shit is still going on. I'm still doing all of their difficult work for them, and I'm now walking on eggshells watching my tone, trying not to offend anyone while dealing with chronic pain that continues to get worse. I attend a department meeting, and afterwards, one of the guys who's managed to stay on as a new hire in my group asks to talk with me privately. He tells me the office politics are very strange. I don't see them because I work remotely. He can't seem to get any traction with anyone to get any work done. The two married managers seem to have an in-group that they promote and an out-group that they ignore and privately disparage. And he said that he's in the out-group for some reason and he doesn't know why. He tells me we need to band together and form an alliance to oppose their alliance. I think to myself, what the fuck is going on in that office? I decline his proposal. A couple of weeks later, he's fired. Fast forward another couple of months. I'm still dealing with all the same crap. Now a second new hire comes to me and asks to speak with me privately. This time it's the competitive intelligence analysis new hire, the one I was trying to mentor, but with little progress on her side. She wants to meet me for breakfast at Starbucks the next morning for an important private conversation. Anyways, I say yes, and now what I'm about to tell you and everything afterward actually happened. I know there will be some, or possibly many, out there who think I'm exaggerating or spinning a yarn. I am not. The next morning, when I sat down with her at the table at Starbucks, she informed me that she was part of a group of concerned feminists at my company that meet regularly after work to discuss female empowerment issues as they relate to the company. And she was here to tell me that I wasn't getting the message they were sending. She said that she and the rest of the women don't care about any of this male geek culture tech crap. She said I needed to stop trying to engage with her and the others as though I expect them to be invested in these products, the customers, the technology, any of it. She said if I didn't just shut up and do the parts of their jobs they needed me to do for them, I would continue to have problems. As she said this last part, she grabbed my forearm with both hands and she squeezed tight, her nails sinking into my skin. Think about how you would take something like that in. Pretty insane, right? I knew I had to achieve perfect clarity with her in that moment. So I ignored her nails and I said, Do you mean to say that all of these complaints about me, about my tone, about me being difficult to work with, the missed deadlines, that this is all some kind of revenge against me for assuming that you and the girls who work for my manager's wife actually care about and want to do your jobs? And she said, yes, I finally understood. I told her that, of course, I wouldn't do as she was demanding. Quite the opposite, actually. As I said this, she let go of my arm. I asked her why she would take a competitive intelligence analysis job at a leading IT startup on the bleeding edge of technology if she wasn't interested in technical things. She said she hadn't realized what the job entailed and that she just wanted a high-paying job, and so did all the other women in the feminist group. She said she had been bluffing up to this point when she nodded and acted like she understood the technology and knew what to do, and that she understood what I was saying. She was doing this on a daily basis, and she said that there was no way she could do the job she had been hired to do. Now she put her hands on my forearm again, this time without the nail squeeze, and with tear-filled, pleading eyes, she begged me, and I shit you not, to form an alliance with her and some of the other outgroup people to undermine my manager and his wife the way they had been undermining me. I asked why the sudden 180-degree turnaround, and she said it was because, as much as she hates it when I make her look bad at work by engaging with her responsibilities, my manager and his wife genuinely scare the living shit out of her. I declined her alliance proposal, but I said I would try to work more closely with her now and with a better understanding now that I knew the situation. I guess what I basically agreed to do was mentor her more closely and cover up for her more directly, mainly because she was just genuinely so afraid of my manager. And I didn't think I'd have any luck convincing her to quit her job, which was really the right thing for her to do. Besides, I figured she wouldn't be employed much longer given what she'd just done. I was sure wrong about that. After our little meeting, I brought what had happened to human resources and made sure my manager was in the room. Like, I never go to human resources for things, but this seemed like one of those situations where I had to take it to them. I didn't know what else to do. So my manager acted like he was surprised by all of these revelations and said something like, "This is well outside my wheelhouse. I don't understand these type things, so I'll let HR take it from here." I explained what had happened to the HR girl. The HR girl said she would take care of it. I was immediately taken off the performance improvement plan, and a weak apology was issued from HR. That was the moment I should have found a new job and quit, but I decided to stay. The VP of marketing then tells me that if I move back to Waterloo so I can be in the office every day, I will be promoted. There's a new position coming available. I figure sure, and then I can also monitor these people and see if I can get a grip on their shenanigans and rescue a ship that has clearly veered way off course. A few months go by and I move to Waterloo in November 2015. The company doesn't cover all of my expenses, but whatever, I'm there. Soon I have a meeting with the VP of marketing again. Here I'm expecting to hear about what steps are being taken to quietly address what is obviously a serious problem threatening the company. I'm there to find out basically who's being fired, who's being moved to a more suitable position, how can I help clean up this mess, what this new position for me entails. He sits across from me with a straight face, and he says he doesn't think these two married managers run interference for each other or play dirty politics, and that the leader of the feminist women's group swears they never sent that frightened girl to shake me down. Incredulous, I ask him how he could possibly believe that, and he says because he had dinner at the house of the married managers, and when he brought up work, they became all awkward. Ergo, they must not discuss work at home. Ergo, they are separate entities who just happen to be married. Have you ever seen the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers? You know that moment when one of the characters realizes the person they're talking with has been taken over by one of the aliens? That moment when you realize someone you know well and respect has sold out because they don't want to do the hard thing. They want to do the easy thing. After this, the in-group began harassing me directly at work in the office every day. The rumors started up again, the strange messages on my work phone, the weird phone calls. There was no position available, there was no promotion. I'd been lured out there deliberately. They started throwing things at me and at my desk, trying to knock over my coffee onto my keyboard, and if they succeeded, the in-group would laugh. The excuse given was that I had earphones on and my manager needed to get my attention. I had earphones on to drown out the constant political chatter. They seemed to be repeatedly trying to provoke an outburst from me at work. One of them went down the aisles to each cubicle, pointing at each person individually and saying loudly, "Hillary or Bernie? Hillary or Bernie?" to each person. And when he got to me, he exclaimed loudly, "Oh, right, you're a Ron Paul guy. Holographic planes into the towers, right?" And the in-group laughed. I traced this bizarre comment back to someone who had once heard me say that I thought what the US needed was a president who had real integrity, someone like a Ron Paul. That's all it took for me to be ridiculed and marginalized in much the same way you see it done on TV these days by activist journalists in the mainstream media. I have a video where Eric Weinstein explains in perfect detail how that's done. So now that I was actually in the office, I understood. This is what these people had been doing to all those other people who had quit or had been fired. They had previously behaved themselves when I was just visiting, but now that the VP had made it clear that he had decided to go to his safe place instead of deal with the problem, they had taken it as a green light to go with just straight workplace harassment. It was pretty intense, too. The manager's wife would yell out slanderous things about me as though I wasn't even there, and I sat across from her. In her thick Southern California girl accent, she would say things like, "Oh my God, can you believe it? Men accused of rape should have to prove their innocence. Rapists should have to prove they aren't rapists." I'm not kidding. That's how she spoke. As I transitioned off the wrong medication on the advice of an emergency room doctor and transitioned to a cannabis prescription to treat what was increasingly looking like nerve damage, someone got wind of it and a rumor began to circulate that I was a drug addict. One of the in-group made a crack about why the room suddenly smelled like a bong the moment I walked in, and the in-group laughed. Stuff like that. Then I found out that the leader of the after-work feminist group that had threatened me was my manager's wife, who sat across from me. Then I found out the HR girl I had brought the incident to was an administrator of the after-work feminist group led by my manager's wife, who sat across from me. Yeah. Although I had always thought this kind of thing was only found in works of conspiracy fiction, here I was in the middle of it. And I knew I was cooked, and oh, by the way, so was the company. No chance for anyone working there. The executives had no clue what was going on, or that the game had pretty much been lost at that point. The cancer had set in, and it was in the process of just sucking every bit of value out of the company and its employees that it could, while eliminating anyone who might get in the way of that. I watched as these people spent 3 times as much energy promoting themselves to each other as they did the company's products to its customers, as the company itself crumbled around them. And you might ask yourself, how could the company founders and veteran executives allow something like this to evolve? Well, I'll tell you. You see this guy? He's a professor who studies religions scientifically. He works within the humanities at Wilfrid Laurier University. And he just opened up a social justice textbook for the first time to discover to his shock and surprise that
objectivity, as found through rational thought, is a Western and masculine concept that we will challenge throughout this text.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I said,
it's too bad. It's too bad that you're shocked by that.
and also that
From the
I
social
just read a
justice
paper that
warriors.
said that mathematics is whiteness.
Yeah, definitely.
I didn't know that mathematics could have a race.
Mm-hmm.
So, if professors at the same university working in the same disciplinary ballpark have no idea what these people are doing, would you really expect a bunch of company founders out of engineering, sciences, maths to have the first clue what's going on or how to get a handle on it? All they know is that they don't want their face, name, or their company's name plastered next to a headline with the words sexual discrimination or sexual harassment on them. That's what they know. And they know that these people from these humanities disciplines that focus on social justice are who they're supposed to hire to ensure that doesn't happen. And before they even realize what's happening, their company is imploding around them, and they are too confused and scared to take the necessary steps to rescue their company and their employees. They're too afraid of those headlines and threats of litigation. I've worked with 2 company founders and vice presidents who didn't even have university degrees. They have no idea what's happening. So at this point in the saga, when I realized I was literally a walking dead totem for abuse, awaiting termination, and unable to seek alternative employment because my health condition was now really bad. I didn't have a doctor because I had to disconnect from the one in Ottawa when I moved, and it takes a long time to find a new doctor in a new city because of Canada's third world healthcare system. I didn't mind so much because I wanted to see a bunch of different doctors to get a big enough sample size to determine whether the doctor I had been seeing was truly the crackpot I suspected him to be. So I had been going to walk-in clinics trying to move the ball along, looking at other options than the misdiagnosis that had wasted so much of my time and energy. The VP called me into his office and asked if I was thinking of taking time off to figure out the health problem. And I said I might have to because I had been told by a number of different Waterloo doctors that my current diagnosis appeared to be in error. A week later, I was abruptly terminated. It was early 2016. They called it a restructuring of the marketing department. I was the only person laid off in the restructuring. I didn't have a doctor, something I just informed the VP of, that could go to bat for me to explain that this was an improper termination that was clearly being done for both political and health reasons and not reasons related to my performance, which still exceeded the capacity of 2.5 regular hires. I was pretty much broke from the move, and now I had no income and a health issue that prevented me from getting a new job. Under duress, I had no choice but to sign a legal disclaimer to receive a severance package. Otherwise, I would have been sick and out on the street with no family to support me. My employee file made no mention of the threats, the feminist group, nothing. What it did reveal is that from the very beginning, my manager had been telling me something different from what he had been putting in my employee file. He had been subtly undermining me for some time. When I complained about the U of Waterloo writing and rhetoric graduate who appeared to believe grammar and punctuation were optional throwbacks to the oppressive male patriarchy, he had attempted to get me fired, unsuccessfully. He and his wife had then shifted to a solicited smear campaign facilitated by their potatoes. The girl that threatened me on behalf of the feminist group was quietly moved to a new position after I was let go. I believe it was an admin position within human resources. I told the VP as I was being led out the door that he was once again doing the easy thing instead of the right thing, and I predicted the company had about 2 years max before it imploded or was taken over by a less worthy competitor. It actually only took a year. Weakened and terribly unfocused, the company was put up for sale a year after I left and was bought by its worst competitor, a company completely lacking in ethics that sells privacy intrusion solutions to telecoms and litigation companies, something the company I had worked for refused to get into, mainly because its employees would have revolted. Everyone I worked with quit or was fired within 4 months of the acquisition. One guy stayed. A little worm I once heard say, "I don't think it's good to keep commercials away from children because otherwise they won't be properly socialized." And when I laughed, thinking he was joking, he became offended because he wasn't joking. That guy stayed on to oversee the promotion of the new privacy intrusion solution offering, the doxing software, and then he left too. What remained of the company was dismantled and scattered into the wind, and I watched over a year as my 8 years of white papers and technology showcases and web marketing were collapsed, cut into pieces, and then eventually deleted forever. I tried going to a lawyer, but he told me the human rights tribunals are not set up for people like me. He said my best bet was to look for an error in my employment contract. I gave this asshole $700, but each time I saw him, it was like he was reading the contracts for the first time all over again. And then I noticed his analysis was full of errors. He thought he had found an error in the contract that I could use to get a better severance, until I pointed out that it was actually him who had made an error. With that, he said, "Oh, you're right. Damn, I guess there are no mistakes in the contract. Well, it was worth a try," and he kept my $700. With what was left of my savings, I moved back to Ottawa, where I have lived ever since. In April of this year, I finally got a proper preliminary diagnosis of what I've been suffering from for 8 years, It's a physical ailment, an infection. I received the correct medication for the correctly diagnosed condition, and it eliminated 85% of my symptoms almost overnight. Apparently, I could have taken 2 pills at any time, just once. Over the course of the 8 years I was acutely suffering from this misdiagnosed infection, and it would have eliminated most, if not all, of my symptoms. That's Canada's healthcare system. I was on a waiting list to be assigned to a family doctor for 6.5 years while I worked in Waterloo the first time. I was never able to get one. Now, because this tropical infection I acquired while on vacation in Mexico went so long untreated, it looks like I have some permanent nerve damage that's going to bother me forever. But as you can see from my channel, since the successful diagnosis and treatment in May, I've become more active, and I've also been looking for full-time work again in my previous field. I actually recently made it to a final interview. It came down to me and another candidate, but they picked the other guy because they said I was overqualified and they were concerned I would get bored and soon leave for something else. It's my first time experiencing the phenomenon of being overqualified for a $65,000 a year job. I do some consulting for investment firms to help them understand the telecom industry from time to time, but it's not frequent enough to live off. And I'm still looking, and I'm pretty optimistic that I'm going to find something soon. Now, I relayed this experience to you because I want you to understand that these people, the Pimlots, the Rambuchanas, the Joels, they and their ideological offspring are out there in the workforce, causing an enormous amount of damage. This is just the tip of the iceberg concerning what I went through with these people. I could probably start an entire podcast series of just bizarre stories from my time working in an office with a bunch of deranged social justice warriors. All white people, by the way. Whatever you need to do to keep your company from being taken over by these people, do those things. If you suspect you have been dropped into a situation like I found myself in, get the hell out. Don't stay and fight, especially if they've captured human resources, as is usually the case. You have to understand that the way these people think is completely alien and incompatible with the goals of any company trying to be successful. They despise merit. They categorize everyone according to their immutable characteristics and, more importantly, according to whether or not they pose a competitive threat. Everything for them is about managing and manipulating perception for the acquisition and protection of their own power. And I want to make something absolutely clear. The behavior of these sociopaths and their frightened and weak pawns had nothing to do with the fact that most of them were women. I have worked with many women in my 2-decade career as a technology writer and marketer. Unbelievable programmers, ASIC designers, hardware specialists, RFP coordinators, project planners, professional service reps, you name it. They love technical things because they are technophiles like me. They drink with the software and IT guys. They understand and tell the stories and the jokes. And they generally look upon the ideologues who use their gender as a crutch to occupy a position they don't even care about with a kind of vague disgust. This has nothing to do with the female gender. This has everything to do with individual people who decided to adopt a sick ideology that these professors use to indoctrinate students into a delusional and deliberately destructive belief system. That girl who met me at Starbucks to threaten me, out of all the women in that after-work feminist group, she was the only one who wasn't white. She was an immigrant from Iran. They shoved her out in front, the non-white immigrant, to wave their threat in my face, like she was some kind of sacrifice. I told you this story so you would know that I understand very, very well what Shepard was subjected to and what Peterson was subjected to. Now, I have what may be my second last visit ever with the specialists later this month. Once that is closed off, I too will be in a position to launch some serious litigation. But I'm still questioning Peterson's decision to launch his lawsuit. As Tim rightly points out in the video I played a clip from before, your statements don't need to be publicly broadcast for it to be slander. For example, one of the former idiots that was doing this shit to me is now captured in a Skype conversation saying defamatory things about me. He's broken civil law. His intent is clearly in the conversation to denigrate my character, to interfere with my ability to make a living. So, he didn't broadcast that to the entire world All he did was make those comments to a former colleague of mine who then forwarded them to me and is ready to sign an affidavit saying, yes, this conversation took place. So I'm trying to decide right now, what will I accomplish in the end by going after each one of these individuals with lawsuits? I'm definitely going after the doctor that gaslit me for 4 years before forcing a bad diagnosis on me. His career is finished. He overruled a previous doctor that had made the correct diagnosis. So he's done. But I debate whether or not to go after the individuals who harassed me and smeared me at work. Should I sue my former company? Yeshua says you should settle things out of court if you can. That's usually best for all. I don't know. I wonder if Peterson wouldn't be better off putting all of his free speech and energy for this particular matter into campus reform, advocacy, and exposure of these concerns. How will $1.5 million from Wilfrid Laurier University paid to Jordan Peterson help solve this very serious problem? These people are now sticky in all kinds of industries. I prefer to throw light on them wherever they can be found with more reporting and brave people like Lindsay than battling them through use of forceful litigation. I wondered if the university would try to play one lawsuit off against the other, Shepard's and Peterson's, and they are in fact doing that here. But if they keep fumbling the ball like this, maybe it's worth just continuing with the lawsuit. Maybe it pours more dye into the petri dish. You can see how bad the quality of the output is from that school. So the students who actually adopt the sick views taught by these ideologically possessed professors go out into the world and just blow the crap out of everything around them. We need to find some kind of solution to it. And I just wonder if it might be better not to be as litigious as they like to be, because I'm worried it brings us down to their level. But I'm still thinking about it, about my own situation and Peterson's. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe and hit the like button.